Tom broke like every Seahawks story here over the last few days, which has been awesome. They've been busy. What do you make of the entirety of what the Seahawks have done in the last week, from trading Geno to trading DK to bringing in Darnold and Lawrence and everything else they've done? What do you make of it?
I would say this. Time will always tell on every free agency period, because there's so many times year after year where those big free agent signings, the big money guys, the top ones, 2 years later, we're talking about them being cut. And that's just kind of the nature of the NFL. In free agency, if you're in that first wave, you overpay for guys, and odds are you're not necessarily going to get the bang for the buck. I would say, in looking at what the Seahawks have done, I like the philosophy of it a lot. Because with Geno Smith, they'd obviously been going on a sort of a year-to-year type of a basis. Geno would have wanted a raise last year. The Seahawks, just organizationally, they've never redone deals with 2 years to go. They told Geno that, came back, played at a pretty good level throughout the course of the season. And so in this offseason, they were all in on bringing back Geno. They made him a contract offer, and Geno did not respond well at all to that offer. So, this is all happening in the past week or so. I mean, that was Friday that the trade got done. But, in the last 10 days, it became apparent that Geno Smith was frustrated and thought that he should be paid a lot more money than he was. And at some point, too, with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, the thought started to percolate of, wait a second, so we can trade Geno Smith, get a third-round pick, and sign a quarterback who's a decade younger, coming off his best season and going to a Pro Bowl at 27 for the same amount or a little bit less money. Let's do that. And then with DK Metcalf, that was not a money thing. There was some stuff out there that they were negotiating. That wasn't true. It was time. And it's something that had been on DK's mind. That's one of John Schneider's favorite players and, favorite draft picks. But you get to a certain point, he had 1 year and $18 million left on his deal. DK decided he was better off going someplace else, and so they worked with him to find a spot. So you trade him, you get a second-round pick in return. So now you've got a ton of draft capital as you head into this thing. Obviously, moving on from Tyler Lockett, that was something that had been in the works for several weeks. He had a big number. They adjusted it last year. He still could potentially come back. That door remains ajar, depending on what Tyler Lockett finds out there in the marketplace. But I think this is what I like about it, is the fact that not only are you're gaining value and you're getting younger, but also you looked at a 10-7 season, short of the playoffs, but the rare 10-win team that missed the playoffs, and said, rather than looking at that and saying, oh, we're 1 or 2 players away, right? Let's make a couple more moves, let's double down, and we're going to get the 12 wins, we're going to get in the playoffs. They're going 10-7 is not the goal. We're competing to build a championship team. We want to build this in the mold of Mike Macdonald, who I believe is still the youngest or one of the youngest head coaches in the NFL. You got a new OC in Clint Kubiak, who's also a young guy, but has play calling experience. Let's really think about, how do we fit Clint's offense and Mike's defense? How do we get the guys in who are going to play the way that we want to here? So you go out and you get value with a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, who only played 4 games last season, but he's a veteran player. He's going to make a difference, from a cultural perspective. And there's also not many human beings that are built like that. You go out and get Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's not a replacement for DK Metcalf, but he showed in New Orleans last year he's still got the speed. He can still make plays downfield. That's part of the puzzle here. Schneider and those guys have always been good in the second, third waves of free agency, seeing the guys who are sitting out there and making moves with them. But I thought that, moving on from Geno and bringing in Darnold, moving on from DK, time will tell on all these things, but the philosophy of it, why they did it, the value they got from it, I thought was really impressive how they navigated some challenging situations. Now let's see what they do with all those added resources.
Tommy, you're so plugged in there, make home in Minnesota. Tell us about Sam Darnold, kind of behind the scenes.
Sam is a great guy, just a very nice dude. He'll go out and throw for 400 yards and see me in the locker room as he's walking through and tell us, be like, oh, hi Tom, how you doing? Just like a normal kind of a guy. He's softer spoken. And really what they did last year in Minnesota with Sam Darnold was they worked with him to not put everything on his shoulders. They really worked with him to get him in rhythm, get him throws that he can make. Maybe ask him to make, let's say, 5 above-the-line throws in a game, meaning, you want to execute the guys who are open and the easy throws, but don't ask him to go out and 12, 15 times a day play hero ball. Maybe a handful of throws. You got to make a play for us. That's what we're going to do. But other than that, we're going to let your playmakers take the pressure off you with Jefferson and Addison, Hawkinson once he got back, Aaron Jones. And there were challenges there. Listen, the interior of the line wasn't good enough. They've upgraded that in this offseason. They just weren't very big. You saw that show up particularly in the Detroit game and the playoff game where they just couldn't function. But the other thing that was great, what they did with Sam was, he would make mistakes and they'd go right back to him. It was not, hey, you threw a pick, we're now going to run the ball 3 times, we're only going to have you throw screens. It was, no, we're going to let you go back and we're going to continue to execute the same game plan. And that really seemed to build confidence with Sam Darnold. I think that the most concerning thing, and the part that didn't mesh with the rest of what they had seen on tape when they went back and were evaluating what type of an offer are we going to make for Sam Darnold, was even more than the playoff game was the Detroit game, where if you go back and watch, there were a handful of throws in the red zone early in that game when the game is very much still within reach. And I think it was like 14-6 at halftime or something. Like, it was not a blowout, but he misses like 5 throws, wide open Justin Jefferson a couple of times. Those are the ones that just make you go, that looks like the old Sam Darnold, not the Sam Darnold we've seen this entire season. But I think it was telling, even with a rookie first-round pick in J.J. McCarthy, they still made Sam Darnold an offer. It was a 1-year offer. It was not at the numbers that the Seahawks were offering on a multi-year deal, but they did try to retain Sam Darnold. He just, you can't turn down whatever it was, $55 million or something guaranteed at this stage in your career with an offense that should be pretty similar to what you've run in the past, and a good organization that knows how to win. I certainly understood why Sam Darnold left, but they loved Sam as a guy in Minnesota. Is he going to be your, alpha male leader all the time? Probably not. That's just not him. That's not his personality. But you saw that video after they beat the Packers in Week 17 last year where they're hoisting Darnold on their shoulders and showering him with the water bottles. Like, the locker room really rallied around that dude. And if, Clint and Mike and those guys can get him on a similar path in Seattle, I don't see any reason why he's not going to be somebody that, even though he's not that vocal type, guys are going to rally around.
A couple more minutes here with not just Seahawks newsbreaker, but NFL newsbreaker, Tom Pelissero, who's on video with us. If you're watching on video on the app or the stream or YouTube or whatever, you get a chance. Oh, he's waving. See, it's very exciting.
I'm really here.
Will you be breaking one more piece of Seahawks news here before the draft that they've found some sort of a starting interior offensive lineman? You talked about the Vikings improving there. We know the Bears have gone out and improved there. The Seahawks need improvement in those 3 spots, center and 2 guards, as much as anybody. And yet there always seems to be some reason why they can't sign this guy, and this guy's too tall, and this guy's too small, and this guy's too old, and this guy's too this, and this guy's too that. Can we just find a couple guys to play in the interior of the offensive line here in Seattle?
Well, remember this. There's still, I know that it feels like everything's already happened because the last, 6 days have been so crazy, especially 7 days, especially in Seattle. But we're still pretty early in the process. There's going to be other players that shake free for one reason or another. Look at some of the teams that already signed interior offensive linemen. Could they trade people? Could they end up cutting guys that become available and don't count against you in the comp pick formula? There's a plan. I think there's been a misconception for years that, the Seahawks just don't value, John Schneider doesn't value offensive linemen. It's not the truth. I mean, look at the draft capital that they've used on guys, going out and drafting a Charles Cross where they did. They've invested in that offensive line. But, are you going to go pay $20+ million for a guard? Are you going to go out and sign Aaron Banks for that type of money? We'll see how it works out for the Packers. Banks, when he's been healthy, has been a really good player. But that's just, they've never been a first-wave free agency team at any position. There's guys out there still. Mekhi Becton is one that jumps to mind that's still available. The center market's been largely cleaned out. That might be, if they're going to upgrade that position, that might be more of the draft. But there's still a bunch of guards that are out there on the free agent market. There's some guys who are being shopped right now that could potentially become available. I thought you were going to ask me, am I going to break a big wide receiver signing for the Seahawks?
We don't care about that. We don't care about that.
You can find those guys. Jake Bobo's season is in full effect out there.
Absolutely. For me, the reason to trade DK was always, and I've been talking about it for a full year, to reset the way your roster is built, spend less of your resources on the wide receiver position and spend more of it up front on the offensive line. But since we have you here, any chance they sign Cooper Kupp?
I think there's a chance. I mean, he's a local guy, really good locker room guy. They've faced him, for years, twice a year. in his days with the Rams here. But there's a bunch of teams that are in on Cooper Kupp. I wouldn't say that, by any stretch that decision's been made at this point. It's rare for a guy who's 31 years old, which is older for some positions, but a wide receiver, guys can produce into their mid-30s. It's rare for a guy like that just to get dropped onto the market. Not that people didn't know what was going to happen, but he becomes available yesterday after they tried to trade him for a month. And then you ask, all right, well, why, if you couldn't trade him, why can you sign him? Well, $20 million and giving up a draft pick for a 31-year-old who's been hurt 3 years in a row is tough. Once that guy becomes free and you're not giving up a draft pick for him, I do think the Cooper Kupp's going to get some money in the marketplace. Does that mesh up with where the Seahawks would have him valued? We'll see. This is not really a top-end, heavy type of a wide receiver draft. If you talk to people within the league, we don't have several of those guys who are going to go really early like we have in past years here. So. But remember this, too. They've got a lot of picks, again, because they picked up a second and a third. They've got a ton of draft capital to maneuver around the board. We know that Schneider likes to trade on draft day. And we'll see. We'll see exactly what they might have up their sleeves.
Tommy, we got about 30, 45 seconds here. Two last real quick ones. Garrett Bradbury, is he a possibility? Somebody that I know Sam Darnold loved, number one. And number two, when is Geno's deal going to get done in Vegas?
I do think that Garrett Bradbury would be a potential option here. I would think that the Vikings will have some level of trade interest in him, but they did sign Ryan Kelly. I think it's fair to believe that Garrett Bradbury most likely will have a new home. Right now, he's still on the Vikings roster, and there's no trigger in his contract, so they don't have to do something right now. But certainly, that's a name that would potentially make some sense. What was the second question?
When does Geno get a new deal? He wanted his big money, he wanted his bag. He didn't get in Seattle. He's not even answering calls, not even texting. So is he going to get his big money there in Vegas?
It's coming. He's not going to play for whatever he's on the books for, 31 this year. I would think it gets done. It's probably going to be a little bit north of what the Seahawks were offering because they're going to want to make him feel good, and Pete's definitely going to want to make him feel good here. That deal is coming. There's probably no rush on it at this point, but I do anticipate he's going to get an extension.
Is it a little odd, though, that it hasn't come yet? I would have expected when that happened, it would hope right away.
The trade didn't even become official until yesterday. At 4 p.m.
Okay, so they technically can't do it until then.
And I mean, remember this too. Geno's got, I'm sure, an introductory press conference at some point here. I would think you want to do that immediately and not end up doing the Broncos one press conference when you acquire Russ and one where you give him an extension 3 months later and then regret the whole thing.
What about all the press conferences as he's talking about Wendy the Wendy lady and it's time to move on?
Okay,
all right.
Enough.
Thank you. It's great to catch up with you. Thanks for doing it on video. It's great to let the people see you and see what you're all about. And thanks for breaking all these Seahawks stories over the last week or so. It's been super fun. We'll talk soon.
You got it, fellas.